Hello, friends and fiends of the pod. I'm your host, film critic and comedian Nate Wyckoff, and today is my special episode of Reviewer's Choice. So last week we had Greg Johnson's Choice, which was our shorts celebration, specifically when we talked about Janice.Click's film McMurderer, and our contributor Jeff Tucker essentially died. So I am going to share our review of 2022's The Batman, starring Robert Pattinson, directed and written by Matt Reeves of the current Planet of the Apes series fame. Why did I choose this episode? I'm choosing this episode because it is the one episode I can think of in the entirety of the many years that we have been running Cult and Classic Films podcast here, where I became fully unhinged. I am such a rabid fanatic about how much I don't like this movie. And I have too many points to share in an episode. So listen to me steamroll my fellow panelists as I go into all of the ways that The Batman from 2022 is a complete failure as both a narrative experience and as a Batman film. And I hate the whole fanboys freaking out and hating something just because it's new or different. This is one of those cases where time will not be kind to the Batman. It is a very flawed film, and there's very little to recommend it once the excitement of being back in the theater post-COVID lockdown has faded. So if you don't agree, listen on and perhaps I'll change your mind. And if you do agree, listen on, because who doesn't like preaching to the choir? Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome to the pod, friends and fiends. This is Nate Wyckoff, your host for Cult and Classic podcast, of course, comedian and film critic here. Today we have a special episode. Normally we do a pair of films in two parts, a mainstream film and a cult film, both of which are thematically related. This time we're going to discuss one film, and that is 2020's The Batman, directed and written by Matt Reeves, starring Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz and some other people. So here's the thing. This movie has been out for a while in theaters. It dominated the return to box office post-COVID lockdown, which is still struggling, but this was the big film for the post-COVID time thus far. It is certainly a financial success for Warner Brothers. It is unrelated to any other DC Universe film. However, the sequel has already been greenlit, and there is also a Warner Brothers The Penguin, starring Colin Farrell, from the film series on HBO Max, and they're running with this. The reason we didn't do this right away, it is now on HBO Max to stream, is because I personally am a very large Batman fan, follow the comics, the mythos over time, the decade differences, the films, the games, the whole deal. I really am. The cartoons, the television series. I'm kind of a Batman fanatic. This is one of my fanboy territories. And I had extremely conflicted feelings and very deep reactions to this movie. And so I wanted to wait to let the divisive rhetoric, because it did very well. A lot of people really love this movie, but there are a lot of other people who found it problematic. So we're going to talk here. I've got Tad Mastroianni with us today. How are you doing, Tad?
Batman.
Mandy Longley. How are you doing, Mandy?
I am ready to metaphorically bite the head off of this bat.
Oh, an Ozzy Osbourne reference. Timely. R.I.P. Just kidding. He's still alive. Last I checked. Jeff Tucker, how are you doing, Jeff?
I'm great. Thank you for inviting me to this lovely bloodbath.
You know, you've been asking to come on so many times, and usually I'm like, Jeff, no, I don't think he's going to work on the podcast. I think he's more of a physical presence kind of guy. But we're gonna give it a shot.
I have a nice aura. Yeah.
We also we were going to have our regular panelist Greg Johnson with us today, but he couldn't make it. However, he did have a couple of things to say about this movie. Quote, I liked it a lot, felt like a detective film that just happens to cut his teeth in big budget filmmaking with the recent-ish Planet of the Apes trilogy, Planet of the Apes, Rise and etc. of the apes. I'm a big fan of the original. I didn't have a problem with those sequel films. I thought it was nice to have them revisited. I thought some of the play between the apes and humans it's another one of those bleak, wow, the humans really are the crappy ones. Big surprise. So I was excited for this initially. The more I saw of it, the more I did get a little concerned, not because of Robert Pattinson. I think Eggers' The Lighthouse is with Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe is a sure sign that Robert Pattinson has the acting chops. There is absolutely no reason he could not have slayed as Bruce Wayne in the Batman. But I do have problems with Matt Reeves' choice for script and directing. And I think even those of us who liked the film, I think have had some problems as we've reflected on this movie. First off, I just want the elephant in the room. It's a 3-hour long movie. It's a 3-hour long movie in which I would say would be hard pressed to actually say 2 hours worth of content actually happened. This is a very slow film. There are lots of slow shots. People move at a glacial pace. It's very odd. In fact, in the beginning, the first time we see Zoe Kravitz enter screen, she sees the Batman as he's talking to the Penguin in the iceberg lounge area, Penguin's haunt. And she literally is setting a drink down. She's a server and she's setting a drink down in the most unnaturally slow, like, this is still not on the table. I'm not even kidding. It's like if you chop the scene out and watch it, it's bizarre. It feels like it's in slow-mo. This is kind of a consistent thing with this movie. It thinks there's something we should be looking at, but I don't really think there is.
I'll give you 2 guesses as to what you were supposed to be looking at, Nate.
So here's the other thing. Zoe Kravitz is one of the most beautiful people in the world. I will say that they did everything they could to put her in the cheapest Target Halloween wigs on the planet in this movie. I mean, I don't know what costumer was on this and said, hey, remember Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049? Let's do that on a budget. Like it's real. Her outfits, it's pretty horrid to me, but that's,
I kind of thought that might have been a choice, right? Like it was like she was on a budget. So they, like, when she was wearing, like, the was like the purple or red wig or whatever, I think that was probably the most egregious one. It really looked like it. And I think it was a choice. I think it was actually like
it could be.
They actually wanted it to look cheap.
It could be. There's a lot. I have a lot of strong feelings about the Catwoman choices in this because Catwoman is, of course, an iconic Batman character, the villain / ally, the love interest, eventual, lover of Batman, like just really iconic. Been played by some of the greatest in history. Of course, Julie Newmar, Michelle Pfeiffer, Eartha Kitt. I mean, this is an iconic character. And first off, I'll say this is, without being sexualized, really, this is still the most male-centric gays movie ever. Not because like she's in skimpy outfits like Halle Berry was in the earlier iteration, which we've talked about several episodes back, but because her character is relegated yet again to a victim with no power, and she's not allowed to be feminine and have like ethical, not even faults, ethical questions that we could ask. For example, and again, guys, there's spoilers. If you want to go see this movie, of course, it's on HBO streaming right now. It's been playing in theaters. It's still in theaters in most places. Check it out. I don't think the spoilers ruin the movie. I don't think there are any big ahas in this film at all, personally. But so I'm going to dive right in. Her character has no arc, and she doesn't drive the plot at all. And she has zero energy. She looks like she's going to collapse at any given time because of, it's also, Zoe Kravitz has the bedroom eyes, very, seductive visual look to her. Her eyes are always half closed. This is not a read on that. But between the fact that she's so little and thin, and the fact that she has that look, and the film is so dark and she says so little, it's like an actual house cat is playing the role. That again could be a choice, but the thing about Catwoman and so many of the comics, think to one of the best representations of Batman's material, which has been the Batman animated series, right, from the 90s, is Catwoman was essentially a character that used femininity to get what she wanted in a very misogynistic world where men called all the shots. She used fluidity, sexuality, feline grace, sex appeal to get what she wanted, and she was capable to succeed in sort of undermining the male brute force of this world of Gotham superheroes and supervillains. And in this, she is relegated again to the most victim-bound arc. It's hard to say arc because I don't think she changes at the end at all. There is John Turturro plays like the big bad gangster in this, and Batman accuses her of trying to steal things, and she's like, I'm not stealing, that's my money, he's my dad, which is number one stupid in my opinion, because we're telling her that in this world that is clearly broken and people are suffering who don't deserve it, she's only okay because she's stealing from someone who's related to her. That's so weird. Are you telling me that she's not ethically covered because if she were stealing from another gangster's blood money? Like, I think that's weird. Then the biggest problem I had is he says, but essentially she's a prostitute at the club, and she's like, and maybe sleeping with the guy. And she's like, no, he's not. I'm not sleeping with anyone. He's my father. And you're like, first off, there's nothing wrong with being a sex worker. And in this Gotham, you're telling me that at this underground club where political figures go to do clandestine drugs in the open, that the servers there are probably not also prostitutes or escorts or something of that nature? Like, I mean, what world is this? Is Gotham actually like nicer and less cruel than the real world we live in? It's weird. So the idea that she, who is supposed to be this force of powerful womanhood, is like defending herself by saying, I'm not, quote, I'm not a dirty person. Like, I'm just trying to get money back from my deadbeat dad, and I'm not a hooker. Like, what? It was just such a missed weird thing to do. Like, I don't understand what the concept was behind that. And again, why am I talking about this stuff that seems like oddballs? Because that's her entire plot. There's no reason she's in this movie. She doesn't drive the plot. There's no attachment to the big villain of the film, which is the Riddler, who is been killing prominent people in the city. And we'll move on from there. But let's just start with Catwoman. Mandy, what did you think about Catwoman and Zoe Kravitz in this film?
I hated her mask with a passion of 1,000 suns, which would have been helpful for lighting this film. Like, it was just so bad, like so unflattering. Not that, like, I mean, like, they did so much else to kind of make her costumes flattering. Like, I had no idea what their deal was with that.
It was
mask.
Catwoman Year One. Nate, remember Batman Year One where he didn't even have the full bat mask? It was basically...
We're going to talk about this because this is the excuse that's being bantered around, is that everybody's new in this. Like, Batman's only like year one or year 2 years. Catwoman's new. Here's the problem. Her costumes are custom made leather cat suits. But her mask,
just forgot the headpiece.
But her mask is a gas station, like,
I mean, yeah, like a tiny person.
It's a beanie.
Like, it's a beanie that she pulled over her head. There's also the idea too that the mask is an afterthought, but yet she has a fully functional whip that she's trained to use. That is only appears in one scene. It just, that the whole thing just kind of seemed like a.
And she's like ninja. I don't even know, like, if she can crack a safe, but like, she's working at a bar. I just didn't understand anything.
No, and some people were supposedly mad because they're like, Catwoman's not a lesbian because she's living with a woman. We don't know their relationship. It's irrelevant one way or the other. It doesn't come out in the movie that she is sleeping with this person that she's trying to find, who turns out to be dead, who was working at the lounge. Like, it's all irrelevant. And that's unfortunately the whole thing, is that why is she in this movie? It's more egregious to me than Sony forcing Venom into Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 when he didn't fit in the plot. because at least when Sam Raimi was dealt with this, that he had to put this in, he tried his best to have him do things in the movie and have screen time. Where in this, Zoe Kravitz appears and disappears from the plot at the will of whatever scene happens to be there. And the only way that can work is if she's not integral to the movie. Yeah, Jeff, what was your take on Catwoman in this movie? Did you have any issues, or what was your feeling?
I actually don't have any strong feelings because she wasn't important to the film. She was, as you mentioned, not really important to the plot. I kind of like, I guess I didn't take as much offense to the choices they had, because I actually do kind of accept kind of the year one kind of argument, because like Batman's not very formidable at all here
at all.
He's and to that extent, like I could actually see future movies improving this film because Batman actually has space to grow. Like he actually can become formidable, and becoming formidable would be interesting.
So at what point in time, because this is the argument that even Matt Reeves said. So Batman, yes, they're having Robert Pattinson play younger. They're trying. At what age is he supposed to be then? Because his parents died how many decades at this point ago? Even if it happened at 16, how is his fire for passionate vengeance somehow stronger now at this point than it was directly after his parents dying? How is he, and what is this one moment of deciding now I'm going to be Batman? And because he already has a relationship with soon to be Commissioner Gordon, so he gets in the crime scenes. So how can he be a new Batman if he has everything at his disposal? I mean, we know that the Batmobile is new, right? So maybe he's just been like the neighborhood Batman. Maybe he's just been working like a 4-block walkable radius. Like, I'm serious. I know I'm being facetious here, but
neighborhood watch Batman.
It speaks to the problem with the whole film to me, which is a core refusal to have a solid concept. The script does not feed well to any plot. Characters have zero development. It's like they took a bunch of things out of a hat that they wanted to include, put them in, and then put the most flimsy, arbitrary framework around it so they could just have things in the movie that have zero impact. And it makes me mad because it's such a bad way to make a film, especially a film for Batman, where we already have all of these tropes, that we know these things. So if you're going to change something or bring something new, you don't have to start from square one. We don't need another origin story of the Batman. And they're like, well, this isn't an origin story. I'm like, really? Because calling it year one or year two is basically saying it's an origin story that we didn't want to like call an origin story.
Well, like, also, I'll give you a different. So I mean, yeah, I can't explain like why, he is what age. I don't know what age he is. I don't know why he is so kind of lame in this film. But by having a starting point of your character being a little bit lame, essentially the entire narrative here is building towards one thing. Batman is vengeance. He goes out and he beats up street toughs at night. Basically, that's like the concept they're going with. We think he did it once. Maybe before this, he was Batman. I mean, that's kind of the idea. They talk about like his concept is he's ruling the streets with fear. Like he wants people to fear him. That's like the. Did you believe that was that he? Did you believe that he could do that at all? I'm just saying. Did they show anything? I know, I get it. They told us that, but did they show us anything that backed that up? Not really. I'm just explaining. I'm not attacking the overall structure of the film. They essentially gave us like everyone's like, oh god, Nate's off the rails. But no, seriously, they basically could have just given us a text scrawl at the beginning that said, sure, but I mean, the year is whatever. Batman's new at his job, but villains are afraid. And then I'm just trying to be devil's advocate here for Matt Reeves. I'm trying to explain his vision. Right? He starts out. He rules. How much is he paying you, Jeff?
How much is he paying?
0. I
I'm
don't
just kidding.
care for this film that much, but I do think that
I know.
it could become better with like a good sequel.
I agree. I do agree with that because everyone involved.
Are we gonna get a Jeff rewrite on this
Wait a
movie?
minute. Let me finish the thing that I'd started on here. Just a second.
Oh,
We can go back to rewrites maybe later. We'll whiteboard it. But here is the premise, right? So he rules the streets with fear. You know, there's like the image of like the darkness, the dark alley or whatever, and the criminal's scared to go in it, and he ends up like running into a car, basically. So that's the concept, right? Is he's vengeance. They call him vengeance over and over and over again, like trying to like drive this idea home. Just in case you missed it,
just in case you missed it, he actually says it to the camera.
Yeah,
So
it's repeated over
anyway.
and over. So then his big climactic end point is him intentionally, based on what Matt, I assume, was trying to do, was he's transitioning from vengeance and essentially invoking fear into invoking hope. That was the concept, right?
Which we all know is what Batman is so good at.
Yeah, and you know, so like the climactic moment, he, you know, chops the wire, falls into the water. You know, very tense moment. We're very scared for Batman because, you know, a small drop into some water.
I was gonna say that.
And then he has like, you know, his Instagram moment where he moves an object that some other people couldn't move, but not like with like great effort. He kind of just like lightly shoves it out of the way.
He's done drugs at this point. He essentially has steroids.
He has like an adrenaline shot.
We don't know. We don't know if it's. I thought maybe that it would be Bane venom because it kind of looks like Bane venom. It's going green, but again, like it's year 2. How could we did see
like some sort of green thing in some sort of sciencey
because it's really
early on.
It's always a good idea.
But anyways, the point is
to put in a new element 15 minutes from the end of your 3-hour movie and make it
who knows
really
what
believable.
Happens. The point is
Deus Ex Machina, and it's a brilliant device that everyone should use to make your script believable.
He pushes this thing out of the way, which I guess was heavy, which they kind of implied because like
I mean, everyone was asleep by that point of the film anyway, so it doesn't really matter what was happening.
Well, Gotham is built out of balsa wood in this universe.
So anyways, and then he helps the kid from the beginning, which was like the potential becoming him kid, kind of like mirroring almost like they wanted to do the origin story, but then they didn't do his origin story. Anyways, so he helps this kid out, you know, across, you know, this like, you know, chest deep water over, you know, a little teeny bit of scaffold, and he helps 2 people out, and then he walks them out. That's like his big like, I am now leading people rather than
50 people trapped behind him in the water needed a guy dressed all in black to lead them through the dark electricity filled water out. That's the thing.
That was the part I agree. That actually was the part that I was just like, this is
I thought I missed something.
Like a flaccid moment. Like it really is like this. Like it really, I can't even, I don't know why people are so like, they had like really like epic music, like it was like this big moving thing, and I'm just like, this feels like such like an Instagram moment. He's like, he gets his moment of helping somebody out.
Do you follow the Instagram for the Batman? Because it is an Instagram moment.
You know what I mean? Like he got like his moment of like, oh, I helped him out. And then
hashtag justice, hashtag no longer vengeance.
Shown like, you know, walking with a flare, you know, it is visually very interesting.
Visually, it's quite nice. Yes.
But like in terms of like the character, it's like, it would have been so much more interesting if like these people actually seemed like they were still in danger. They looked like they were just fine. And like, you know, eventually they were going to get out.
It looked like they were waiting for a bus.
Yeah. Like it looked like they were just hanging out. And so I guess he like moved something heavy and it like they were still too scared to get out on their own or whatever.
Yeah.
Blah 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 blah. It would have been like way more impact. Here's my rewrite. Here's where I start rewriting. It would have been way more impactful like if he like, you know, took somebody on his back and like carried them out. It wouldn't have been as visually like interesting, but like then he goes back in, like he does it over and over and over again. That would have been a heroic moment. That would have been like exceeded this like Instagram post of like showing him, helping somebody over, literally like a chest object.
Yeah, you know what would have been easier is if he wasn't in a bat suit and he just happened to be someone who went there to help people. Like, that's part of my thing. Nothing in this movie, and you've kind of got to this, nothing is actually very exciting in this movie. Everything is at one level the whole time. It feels sort of like if you took a network cop show, like the first season, when they put a little money into it, before it just becomes whatever schlock, and they have Batman in it. And it feels like it's supposed to be a TV series because it's so mellow and low energy.
Well, I think it actually would be almost more interesting if it wasn't Batman, because like some of those kind of mild things that he would do, if it wasn't Batman, you'd be like, oh, that's exciting.
Except
for the plot exciting that this person, you know what I mean though? Like if you change like a couple,
you're saying that if you put a different character in it, that it would highlight the plot, but the problem is the plot, which we'll get to, doesn't work. So I'm
merely talking about
both.
the action scenes. The action scenes were like a little bit like soft.
Well, and I agree. So regardless, that's a good word for it.
If you took somebody that was more like a regular Joe and you had them falling into this water, you would maybe be a little bit tense. You know what I mean?
Like if it were a key trying to go into a lock to open a door, it would actually be made of spaghetti and it would just flop around, maybe stick to the door, but it's not quite done yet, so I don't think it would. Here's what I'm getting at. I just want to touch before we move to Tad, because Tad has to talk to us about Catwoman and get in here. He's being very patient. I want to just throw in, because you mentioned the action being soft. The fight scenes are very, very unsatisfying to me. And I'm thinking you don't have to like Zack Snyder by any stretch, but if you look at like Batman versus Superman, there is one standout action scene with Batman where Batman, he breaks into the villain's hideout, their multi-rise hideout, and saves Martha Kent. And it is the most brutal, effective takedown of a group of people. And yes, it's true that Batman isn't, at this point in the game, it could be earlier on, he's not the expert that he would become, but he uses all the things: strength, power, technology, momentum, grappling, actual martial art moves, all these things to make it really effective. And all the action in this movie it's almost as if they didn't have a real choreographer. It's really basic and kind of meh. You never see any of the brutality. And you would need something like that and other moments as well that actually include some story elements or character interactions to make that arc that you're talking about, Jeff, because I think you're right. They hit us over the head with that it's supposed to be there, from I'm angry vengeance to I am hope, which really should be I am justice, because he's not giving them hope. He's not rebuilding their civic center, right? He's just saying that I can help people beat the bad guy. But if he had moments where he went too far with violence, like they pretend that there's that moment, right, when he starts punching a guy a bunch, but really there isn't. There's no one there saying, like, it's like they wanted the stop Bruce, you'll kill him moment, right? That stupid trite moment. But there's never back and forth. He's never too kind or helpful to a villain, and he's never too brutal to a villain. So him, quote unquote, finding his way doesn't work, which is why he had to give the monologue, the 3-line dull monologue of I am hope, blah, 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 that he had. And he also had to say, I am vengeance. Like, which, by the way, don't use a meme to be your serious moment in the movie. Don't do that. Like, I mean, X-Men 3 was not a good film, in my opinion, but if they had Vinnie Jones say, I'm the Juggernaut bitch, and it was supposed to be like meaningful and like powerful, that would have been a fail. But even at that point, they knew that was not going to be the case. It was going for a laugh. So don't have Batman looming over the camera going, I am vengeance. It's not a good look. That's me on that. And okay, Tad, what was your take on Catwoman in this movie?
Nathan, you are so fucking mad.
I am, because here's the thing. When I walked out of the theater, I actually was a little relieved. I was like, I would give it a C-, which sounds really harsh, but I mean, I like a lot of movies that are C minuses. I like a lot of D movies even, right? But I recognize that there are problems. But it's sort of like how in a movie that has a big gotcha moment, like an M. Night Shyamalan twist, it only matters that it works in the moment, because the more you think about it, there's too many holes that are present. So it's all about the experience. This is one of those movies that the longer you sit with the plot, the more problematic it becomes and the more ineffective. And Jeff said, we'll whiteboard this as a joke to rewriting it. If somebody had whiteboarded this movie, it certainly doesn't show, because every single little thing is just a bad moment to me. It's like they did the bare minimum. It feels like someone's C-level homework. They know they didn't plagiarize, but they didn't include any of their own thoughts.
I
right?
have the answer for you.
Okay,
I'm
first,
listening. I've got my own thoughts. One, what you are experiencing right now is everything that I experienced with the latest Star Wars sequel trilogy. That thing where we had a sit down with Chris Seaver and we talked about it, and everyone saw me lose my shit over it, and I'm like, this is what I went through. This is,
and listeners, we're going to talk about it again because we haven't actually discussed the the modern trilogy of Star Wars. But anyway, continue.
I'm not watching Rise of Skywalker. I'm not doing it. Anyway,
it's the best of the new trilogy. Anyway, continue.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, what you're also describing, as far as I'm concerned, is everything that I found that dissatisfied me about Spider-Man Homecoming, because I left it feeling empty. Like, this is not a Spider-Man movie to me. And that's because they skipped a lot of shit that makes Peter Parker Spider-Man. And thankfully, the new movie fixed a lot of that for me. Even if there was a whole bunch of fan service, they fixed a lot of it. And in fact, they overcompensated in some ways. But it's like, I'll allow it. But what you're looking for, Nate, and I'm sure because you are a college professor and you know the term, this is a simulacrum of a Batman movie. This is not a Batman movie. This is everybody trying to to build a Batman movie. It's not an imitation.
Through consensus.
Yes. So,
yes. And this is the focus group Batman.
Yes, and that's not to say that I didn't like a lot about it. And that's the thing, is I was skeptical about the Robert Pattinson thing, but that's because my brain was still stuck in 2007.
Twilight, yeah. Let's talk about this though. What did you like about the movie? Because I mean, I'd be the first to know that I am rife with negative opinions about aspects of this movie, but I do want to hear what you enjoyed about this movie, and maybe we can find some ground.
So I thought that Robert Pattinson was actually a superior Batman to Christian Bale. And now keep in mind, Nate, we went to go see Batman Begins in theaters. Do you remember how meh that movie really is? Have you watched it lately and went, it's only kind of okay?
It's okay because of the Ken Watanabe, Ra's al Ghul moment. The actual Batman in the Kevin Nolan movies is not very good, in my opinion.
It's not. The fights aren't very good. Christian Bale can't do Batman. He makes a Batman. I think
a lot of it is Nolan's fault too, because he has a problem with having people speak in his movies.
Yes, clearly. I consider The Dark Knight to be an accident. If you look at the entire trilogy, The Dark Knight is an accident. It was too good for what that trilogy ended up.
I wouldn't know if it's an accident, but sort of it was the perfect storm where everything worked, because you had a really strong actor build their own character in it. And they chose to focus on that character because it was well done. The rest of it, yes, it doesn't work like that.
Hence why one of the reasons why the only thing that saved some of the latest Spider-Man movies for me is how well the villains were done, which is okay by my book, because oftentimes the villains are overlooked and it's really important to build them and make them proper. And the villains are great in the new trilogy, and Spider-Man sucks. I'm sorry, but this new Spider-Man isn't great. He's better, much like, and yeah, I know I'm going to have the hot take opinion.
Send your hate mail to,
Black Panther was better in Civil War, and then they gave him his own movie and they didn't develop him. Like, he wasn't there for his own movie. It's kind of like the same thing they did with the Netflix movie.
We're not going to talk about Civil War because that was a bad movie. So nothing, in my opinion, was better about Black Panther. So I get what you're saying, though. He had this mystery about him because he was so aggressive and wouldn't listen to Bucky. But that's you're completely, I can't overlook the fact that Tony Stark turns into a giant man child that has no concept of reality in that movie. So we're going to sidestep that.
That's another conversation, but
it is
my what I'm trying to get at is Batman is one of the only characters where I've always felt he's truly got that real duality between what is the mask and what is the person. There is a distinct separation between who Bruce Wayne is and
but you saw that in this movie?
Yes,
because I think you're making it up, and here's why I'm going to say that. And I'm not trying to, I think you're wishful thinking it, because here's my issue. Matt Reeves over and over and over again talked about how he saw Kurt Cobain as the template for this Bruce Wayne. Now, here's my issue. As someone who Nirvana was very formative in my, like all of us who grew up when the rise of grunge, was Kurt Cobain in interviews was very sort of taken aback, not even reserved, but very timid, quiet, uncomfortable with the entire setup of answering questions. That's what Christian Bale is in it. I mean, Christian Bale, that's what Robert Pattinson is in this movie. The problem is that when Kurt Cobain is on stage, when he was on stage, he was the performer, the music, the aggressor, all the emotion. And what's supposed to happen is that Batman, Bruce Wayne, can be the timid, orphan, damaged boy, but Batman is the emotion. And Matt Reeves, and I can't help but think Robert Pattinson too in this case, blew that, obliterated any delineation. He uses the same voice. He is so quiet and timid that when he's in, when Gordon brings him into the crime scene, he won't even look in the direction of other officers. He seems like a scared, damaged child, that's Bruce. I don't know how you could, especially when you have Gordon, who's on his way to becoming commissioner, when you have him, he's going to see Bruce Wayne. He knows who Bruce Wayne is at some point, even if Bruce Wayne doesn't show up to almost anything. He's one of the most rich people in the town, right? The richest person in the town. So they're going to know that. Every single person who has a TV, who ever saw a glimpse of him, would know that's Batman. Did I like Christian Bale's growl? No, it was ridiculous. It was too much. I didn't mind the voice changer with Zack Snyder, but I understand it's a choice because when we read the comics, we don't hear that. So it's hard to make that, it's a choice, right? But there has to be a middle ground. He cannot act and stand and walk the same way as Bruce Wayne. It feeds into what Jeff said. This was, to me, the most disappointing Batman figure ever. He can't fight. He's the world's worst detective. He got zero information on his own. Absolutely nothing. 100% of the shots were not taken, and he didn't get them. He was fed every single line, and there weren't even any puzzles. There weren't even any puzzles in this movie. They're fake puzzles. And let's go to the Riddler, okay? Because Paul Dano plays the Riddler. We only see him actually as a recognizable character really within the last 45 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm not super familiar with his work. He's a very competent actor from what I've seen. They play him as this weird mix.
I don't know.
Right. Mandy. Yeah, let's go. Mandy, what do you got on docket?
I was just gonna say, like, for a kid who grew up an orphan, he sure knows a lot of dad jokes.
Oh, I can't get over the fact that this was, and Matt Reeves, like, I know you actually can write a script because you've written other movies that have been better, but you have lines in this movie. There aren't that many lines. And some of the lines you have in this movie are the worst lines that should never be said again in any movie, unless it's like a Will Ferrell movie and it's a joke of it. Because, like, he has him turn to Alfred, "You're not my dad. You're not my dad, Alfred." Like, what is this? Is this Seventh Heaven? Like, what garbage? I'm sorry, it's the most ridiculous. Also, why is Alfred in this movie? Here's what Alfred does. He shows up to give one snide comment to Bruce, who then says that. He feeds him a line about what this one line that could be Spanish or could be Latin or, anything, what it is, which, by the way, has nothing to do with the plot. They pretend it does. It has zero to do with the plot. Diagram it out. It's not even irrelevant. He gives him that. And then he opens a letter bomb that comes to the house. That's, by the way, what moron? He knows he's going out as Batman. You get a mystery package to Wayne Manor, which, by the way, I kept expecting Doctor Strange to pop up, because what is this fucking medieval castle in the middle of a duplicate of New York City?
You didn't even let me get to that, Nate, because the visuals were one of the things that I sort of liked about this movie. For one, the car chase scene was pretty cool. And I like the idea that they made the Batmobile a little more stealth.
It's a muscle car.
It's just a muscle
stealth.
car.
It's a muscle car with a short muffler.
Stealth, as in, you know when the Batmobile is driving down the fucking street, you know when the tumbler's coming down. But a souped up Charger in Gotham City, people will be like, it's a loud fucking car, who cares? But did you notice
I'll give it to you, I guess.
How much Matt Reeves tried to homage 1989 Batman? There's film grain on the movie.
I don't care about 1989 Batman. You know why? Because this is nothing about 1989 Batman.
Sure.
It doesn't feel like it. Do we? Because I mean, we care because Michael Keaton is going to be in The Flash.
No, right? I mean, they want you to care. Did you see how many beats they took from other Batman movies to put into this? Like I said, simulacrum. They went, this is
I agree
stuff they put in other Batman movies.
But it doesn't look right. It looks like he took a James Wan movie set, because it's so fake. And I'm sorry, you have how many servants you must have in this house? Nobody's dusting the bookcase. Like, what is happening here? Like, and they don't address it. It doesn't make any sense. Nothing matched. When you see Gotham, it's always orange with tubes of metal carrying steam to other tubes, right? I get that. I get that's what you went with, but it doesn't make sense. So anyway, Alfred opens a letter bomb, and then he spends the rest of the movie in the hospital, which we see once. It's irrelevant. He is so completely, I'm sorry, he shouldn't even be credited in this movie, because he's not given a chance to act. There's no reason for him to be there. Also, can we get to the Riddler? And here is my biggest issue: is the Riddler is supposed to be the plot, right? And they did an interesting choice with the Riddler, where they tried to combine both the anti-establishment, sort of anti-corruption left with the Proud Boy internet troll Stormfront right. They took both of them and they crammed them together into one essentially internet fuckboy, pardon my French, who decides to not randomly, I guess, he says it's not random, but kills some big figures in Gotham politics, which, guess what? It's not the plot. The plot is he's actually set a bunch of charges on the Bay, so he's gonna flood downtown. That's actually the point. And when everybody then goes in, because it's a fake, even though it's not a fake because they have to leave, it's getting flooded, they all go to where they're supposed to go in case of an emergency, which is the big Gotham auditorium downtown. And when they get there, his internet trolls are on the big like lighting system catwalks with weapons and ammunition, and they start shooting the crowd and try and kill the mayor. That's his big plan. But here's the question I have about this. He's supposed to be smart, but nothing has any purpose, meaning, or I'm just going to say it, riddles. There are no riddles in this movie. They say they're riddles, but they're not riddles, because here's what he does. Here's what constitutes a riddle in this movie. First off, the only thing that might actually be kind of a pun, at least, is that he has information on a thumb drive, which he has shoved into a severed thumb. Okay, can we just say that that is both not a riddle and not very effective? Because number one, they would never put that into a computer right away. It would go to a lab, but whatever, who cares?
Well, it was actually a thumb, like on a keychain with a thumb drive also on the keychain.
It's really stupid is what it is. But anyway, whatever. Okay, I get it. I actually think though,
it's a pun.
Exactly. It's a pun. Yeah, it's a pun. But fair enough. Okay, the Riddler's allowed to have bad puns. He had bad puns in the comics too. Here's the thing. The riddles are all of the people that the Riddler, which by the way, why did they call him the Riddler in this? Because he wears a costume with a bullseye on it, and like an Aimer logo, and that's it, and monocles under like a green garbage bag. That's all it is. But okay, it's a choice. That's fine. I'm not even mad at that, because the Riddler's costume in the comics is bonkers. So I get it. But here's the deal. He kills people or sets them up in these discount bargain basement saw traps that are so clearly ripped from, again, James Wan, who I don't even like James Wan's movies, took James Wan's saw traps, and then he inscribes cryptic poems on them, which are not riddles. There is nothing to understand or learn. Also, if it was a riddle, if you could argue to me through actual semantics that any of these are riddles, they don't matter because they have no impact, because the answer is the guy he's killing is either already dead or dies by the time you can read the riddle. It doesn't make sense. So when you call him the Riddler and you're like, oh, what an interesting take. No, he's just a serial killer that's ripping off Saw movies with devices that are so small and poorly designed that we as the audience cannot see them effectively. It was bad. I really, really didn't like that, because the idea of that actually had some merit to be interesting. Make the Riddler scary again, right? That's an interesting idea. A murderer that has a plan, he's a zealot, it makes sense. But the problem is his outcomes have no sense. He's not going to bring down the, basically there is a scandal, okay, which is sort of ripped from Court of Owls, Scott Snyder's really excellent Batman story, which, by the way, Matt Reeves, I don't think cited as a reference, despite citing every other major Batman story except The Dark Knight Returns as a reference. Yeah, it didn't make sense. So then, okay, we get the Batman looking around with one remaining police officer in the Riddler's dingy apartment, okay, which is full of other saw traps that I guess he didn't plan ahead enough to use. I don't know. The Riddler's in prison. Which is totally fine. I think it's valid to have this kind of character. He's clearly, they try and put him on like, not maybe the real spectrum for people who have autism or things, but like the TV mode of autism, right? Where like he doesn't really get cues, he's hyper focuses, and he can't communicate effectively. So which is why he's thrived in this little self-delusional online environment. But when he thinks that his plan is spoiled before it comes to fruition, he then has a break and he freaks out and he cries and he becomes hypersensitive to stimuli and just shrieks and stuff, right? Interesting choice. I'm okay with that. I actually think that's an okay choice. Paul Dano, okay, cool, whatever. Because it's vogue. Ever since Heath Ledger took on the Joker, it's been vogue that you can't just have a Batman villain with a good script. You have to give the Batman villain some sort of insane twist, right? Because a guy who tells riddles to commit crimes in case so he could be caught if someone's good enough is not crazy, right? Like he's not crazy enough. He has to be scream at the top of his lungs that someone stole his train truck or whatever, you know, at the birthday party when someone discovers his plan. Whatever. I'm off the rails there. I get it. Okay.
I got a take on the Riddler.
Okay.
If you're willing to
absolutely
cede control to me for so my first problem with this film was it was too soft. The second problem was it's too simple. Whenever you have like clearly this was a noir style, like with the voiceover right from the get. It was like, gritty, dark, blah, blah, blah. It was like, textbook what it was meant to be. But when you have like that kind of the detective mystery thing, you really want some sort of interplay between, your killer and the detective.
Protagonist. Yeah.
In this case, our detective is defective. He doesn't really do any of the tropes, like the he
doesn't question anyone.
Nate was saying,
analyze anything.
He kind of does through like a proxy for the DA, but like he could have then just run down and question the DA himself, but instead I can't even remember what happened next in the plot. Anyway, doesn't matter. Because
it's not connected to what happens next. Anyway, continue.
He basically just follows these pretty poor puns, like pretty obvious puns, through this like series of places where the Riddler wants him to go. The one time he goes to the wrong place and he starts chasing down the Penguin, the Penguin then gives him like, "Hey, you idiot, you mistranslated this phrase from Spanish, and then like, he works it out in his head and adds words, and then URL comes out of it. It's a pretty bad pun, and it wasn't really very clever. That whole kind of series of events.
It also could have been more quickly solved with Google Translate, which apparently doesn't exist in this universe.
Yeah, but I mean, but then you get to your next breadcrumb from the Riddler again. There was never a point where Batman basically overcame or was like a step ahead of the Riddler.
Never.
Not ever. Like, not even close. Like, he was like 3 steps behind always. Was just following.
He only learned about the explosion not in time to stop it because the one cop that was with him at the scene was like, yeah, that's like a carpet hammer or something. It's something to pull up carpet with.
The way we want our detective to solve this is be like, what is this object? I am very curious. That has to have some meaning, and then they go and research it. Having literally just a random person show up that's not even named, be like, oh, this is what that thing is that you should have been curious about.
Does Batman not have a phone? Because I'm sad that this Batman could have actually solved the crime much earlier had he like my old outdated Samsung Galaxy 10. Like, there's no Bat computer. There's not even, it's like he is in 1965.
Well, he had like the laptop there that he went to the URL with, and anyways, I agree with you. It's kind of weird. Like,
it's so bad. Plus, the carpet wasn't pulled up. They didn't study this apartment of a serial bomber murderer at all. They didn't lift up the carpet, which is clearly patched in a weird shape in the center of the room. Like, it's just the most. It's a lack of forethought into how to make the movie effective through multiple watches. Even if I saw it and I loved it, I would then go home, and as soon as it came on HBO Max, what would I want to do, right? I want to rewatch it. Everything would become brutally apparent immediately, and it would kill the joy to watch it again. So here's the other problem.
Let me just finish my point. So
fair.
So the two simple things. So like, here's why that interplay works so well in films. Like, if you probably have seen this 100 times and you didn't even notice it, it's like 2 grandmasters playing chess against each other. It's very interesting to see people kind of basically tilt back and forth.
It's Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty.
Yeah, you get that interplay where you're like, one person's outsmarted them, and then back and forth. This feels more like a grandmaster playing chess against a child. It's like it actually diminishes the grandmaster. It's like, okay, you beat a 12-year-old that can't figure out like the most simple, like doesn't even understand the rules of the game. And so it's like the Riddler's not even actually should have been really interesting, but is not interesting because he doesn't have anybody formidable to push up against. He's not being tested. He actually gets angry at Batman in this film that he didn't figure things out. He's like, I left like a very clear clue. Like,
he's like, he literally says, "Oh, I thought you were so much smarter, right?" Like, he's like, "Oh, I thought you were smarter."
And I thought so
we
too.
Yeah,
and that was frustrating because it diminishes everything in this film by making Batman so like
incapable.
Exactly. He's he needed to really outsmart the Riddler at least once and get ahead of him at least one time.
He doesn't at all.
He had to get ahead. He had to be clever. He had to figure something out. It just leaves the whole thing flat.
Well, and you said everything is right for noir, but I'm going to go back to Tad. It's like a simulacrum of noir because it looks like it should be noir. They're telling us it should be noir, but noir is the critical thing is that there is a mystery to be solved, and we are being fed along with the people in the film bits and pieces to when the reveal is made. We aren't, wait, what? We're not angry. We're not confused. It makes sense, but we still didn't get it. That's the biggest one because they got us. And this movie doesn't have it.
The only thing I'm going to say about the Catwoman plot is you're correct, because where did the murdered hostess go? Well, it turns out they just found her in a car randomly. Batman,
which was the only good reveal, but it didn't matter. It had nothing to do with anything.
It was like, oops, we just happened to trip on her body. Like Batman didn't solve that either. But what I was gonna say, Nate, is to keep on that theme going, is I noticed a lot of weird story beats where they just kind of pulled stuff and just went, if you're clever enough to know a lot of Batman media, you'll get the reference. It's pretty obvious they lifted the assassination scene straight out of the Dark Knight. Like he does the same goddamn thing. Same thing with the flooded city. It's Arkham City. They flooded part of Arkham. I mean, they flooded
and a little bit of Cataclysm
yeah, it's just they pull a whole bunch of stuff, but without.
We should have seen the harbor and the dikes. We should have seen that earlier, because when you just introduce these big things, even though like those of us who know Batman know that Gotham is sort of like
actually, again, I thought I was missing stuff through this whole film. Right. I thought I was missing things
because they keep introducing things that don't matter.
And it turns out I did not.
No,
you just were making things up. Okay,
you're missing things. No. Everybody should know that there's a drug called Drop in this Batman universe, which they reference several times within a 10-minute scene that has nothing to do with anything, that people do openly in clubs where you literally use eye drops to put drugs in them. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's stupid and it doesn't matter.
I kind of like when you put details in, like I'm not necessarily advocating for Drop, but like in the street tough scene, where like there was a bunch of basically like kind of Joker kind of ass. They had like the painted faces, and then there's one who had basically half of his face was covered with paint, and clearly was his initiation, and he was going to earn the other half of his paint. Like they didn't have to explain it.
Here's the thing, though.
Get it.
Right, that was one of the better parts. But here's what I'm going to tell you: you're catching that is sort of also an accidental success on the film's part, because that actor, I mean, hold on, that actor is Tim Drake from the Titan series, which was introduced last season. So he is an Easter egg in and of himself. Were he fully in makeup, he would not likely be very discernible. So the fact that they focused so much on that was clearly given extra because it's an Easter egg for Titans fans. So, and I agree with you though. I liked the fact narrative storytelling, that's using things that actually work for the medium, right? Half the face. It's, it's going to be like, this is initiation. He's not going to join the Jokers now because Batman showed up and clumsily beat them. Yeah, so I agree with you. By the way, I also just did a little on-the-fly research. Our producers phoned in. Matt Reeves intended for this Batman to be about 30. So let me tell you what Batman has been doing with his life to gear up to be Batman. He's been playing Fortnite. That's essentially what I can assume, because he has nothing ready for Batman.
That's what I thought, because they said it was 20 years. I was like, he probably had his parents killed around 8, so he should be around 28 by the time this movie plays out.
It doesn't work, because I understand the trouble and the struggle that Matt Reeves didn't want to do an origin story. He said that because it's been done so many times, and because people like us complain that it's been done so many times. But here's the problem. He still was doing an origin story, as we said. And when you're still doing an origin story, but you don't want to put it in the timeline that makes sense for the story, you get this. You get the Jesus conundrum. Where's the 33 years, man? You telling me he's still a virgin, but he's 33? Like, it's that argument. Batman didn't do any Batman stuff to get good at it before 30? Like, we're expected as millennials to have careers by now. And I'm like, and Batman can sit on his duff and not know how to use Google Translate, doesn't know Spanish, has to be schooled by everyone's old Italian grandpa who is Colin Farrell as the Penguin, which, by the way, great prosthetics, give it to them. Like, it's so broken. It feels like cosplaying. It feels like there's a person cosplaying as Batman. Like, this is the Birdman with Michael Keaton, and somebody thinks he's Batman, but he's not really Batman. If that was the big reveal at the end, they shoot him and he's like, my body armor's not working. And he dies, like, because you're not body armor. You're not Batman. You're just some kid. That would have worked.
A guy in a hockey mask.
I'm not wearing hockey pads. Yeah. That's the thing. And we didn't talk about Colin Farrell as the Penguin. It really is a full transformation. He doesn't sound like Colin Farrell. He doesn't look like Colin Farrell. He does play like an Italian mobster. Here's my issue with that, though, too. I think he could be interesting for a series, but his character has zero reason to be here, because and he's not very smart, because when the Selena Kyle's parent dad is killed, or excuse me, taken into custody, killed, I don't even remember at this point. He's then they basically, he's going to run the business, but then he flips out and gets arrested too. When if he was any sort of gangster, he would have stepped back. Either he's loyal and he steps back and he's going to run it from, while, you know, run it in the meantime, or he really wants the top and this is actually all to his benefit, which would have been a good story point, which is what I thought was going to do, because they've only done it for the entire run of the TV show Gotham, and like it was successful. So I thought maybe they would understand that plot point, but instead they just throw it away. And not even throw it away. They show you the opposite happening. Also, here's a problem. We know that police procedure isn't followed in this at all, which is fine because it's a comic movie. Okay, I'll give them that. I'll give them that the police literally just left a guy in a suit in the crime scene and didn't check anything whatsoever, even though there are models of murder devices lying around. Is Batman uses the front door several times to go to the Iceberg Lounge. He literally knocks on the door. Can you think of a less intimidating, less Batman concept than knocking on the door and having to actually converse with the bouncer?
You know who
like I would have to do? Like I would have to do. What madness is this? Like, I know that they wanted they wanted the club to be underground. Fine. Are you telling me there's no other way for Batman to come in? He has to walk past the bouncer and actually get in fisticuffs with a bouncer for a public bar to get to the Penguin? It is the most sad. And not only is it sad and poorly directed, in my opinion, and by the way, it's poorly directed. I watch a lot of bad movies, guys. Is he actually, like, we see it several times in long form. We see it multiple times. It is, I don't know how you walk into a meeting with even the most ridiculous garbage of a human executive producer who's been around forever that they will have to scrape out of the chair at Warner Brothers when they die. You know who I'm talking about. When you get even that, I don't know how you walk into that person's office and say, here's this scene. Imagine dark street. It's night, nightlife, the docks. Batman knocks on the door, opens it. Bouncer says, get bent, punches bouncer, walks in. Bouncer's still fighting him. Why at that point would you not say, oh, I'm sorry, you're fired? You're fired. What is, I just don't get it. Like, is it because it had never been done before? Was he trying to do anything? Was he like, I can't do anything new, so let me have Batman use the front door and have to struggle past the bouncer like any Joe Schmo would have to do? I just don't get it, guys.
They missed an opportunity. They could have opened the door and he could have just said, I'm the goddamn Batman.
I'm the goddamn Batman.
And they could have just let him in.
I thought there would be some change. Like, I thought they'd open the door and the bouncer would be beat to hell and he would just step back and go right in. Like, nothing. It's just, also, you don't understand, guys. If you haven't watched this yet, Batman doesn't just knock on the door to go in. He then has to walk through the dance floor, presumably, to get to either the secret club in the back or the Penguin's business office. He has to walk through 20-somethings in their really, really cheap Amazon skanky outfits, men and women who are wearing too much cologne. He has to bump shoulders with these people to get to his big meeting with the Penguin. It is incompetent.
It would have made more sense if they had built it up to the point where they were already like going to have that meeting anyway. And they basically were like, oh, we were expecting you. Come on in. The boss wants to see you. and it could have been shorter, and it would have been like, well, Batman's got a rep in this town and basically no one wants to fuck with him, so let him see the boss.
I'm like, Batman doesn't have plans to all of the air ducts. We couldn't at least just have the idea that Batman shimmied through the air ducts and Penguin just goes to the thing. Maybe he's like, I gotta drain the snake, and he goes and opens the door to the can with his hand on his zipper, and Batman is there. Can we have anything different than knocking on the door? Like, and you should have told Batman, just hand the guy a 20 and he'll let you in. It's not freaking Fort Knox. Like, I mean, it's just, I was sitting in the theater looking around like, am I on drugs? Like, did I take an eye drop full of amphetamines? No, because I am not ripping my seat up and throwing it at the screen, which any sane person would do at that point after watching Batman go into the club through the front door.
How do you think they're going to handle the Joker?
So here's the deal. We all probably at this point, if you're a fan or whatever, have seen the deleted scene of the Joker from this movie. Now, the Joker we only hear him in the actual theatrical cut. He is in the cell, sort of catty corner to the Riddler. He's played, does anybody remember his name? I apologize. He's actually, no. I think a very skilled actor. He's from the Eternals. Here's the issue, okay, for me. It's so hard to do the Joker now because everyone thinks they have to take a new, unique take. The sad fact is that the only take that has not been taken of the Joker is the one from any of the comic books, right? So we've had some cool Jokers, right? Jack Nicholson had a very fun, interesting take. We had, of course, Heath Ledger's iconic take. We have the take inspired by the Laughing Man in the original 60s Adam West, Emperor Ward TV show. We have Mark Hamill's brilliant. Mark Hamill's probably the closest to the comic Joker from the animated series. Okay, we have those Jokers. The comics themselves have several different variations on the Joker. You could pull any one of them, and that would be something we haven't seen in a live action film. But instead, they're like, we have to take it farther. What did Heath Ledger had? Oh, he had scars around his lips. We're going to give this guy giant bulboid tumors on his face, huge scarring, scraggly green hair, which somehow, I guess it's genetic at that point because he's been in Arkham. So he's not getting any dye. Like, and because he's played by a young actor, this horrible Quasimodo figure sounds like someone who is on a Nick show, a Nickelodeon teen show. His voice does not match the visual at all. It's not the
slightest bit intimidating.
No, and it's just so like the idea. And here's the thing: why did you cut that scene? Because it actually at least was something different. Where I tell you why. This is why they said, because it wasn't integral to the plot. It didn't necessarily work. Nothing in the movie was integral to the plot. Nothing. Can I tell you guys, listeners, think about how the Riddler caught, I think it was his second victim, right, out of the drop head, quote unquote, the guy who was doing drugs. He was a city comptroller? I don't even remember. He was
the DA.
Oh, he was the DA.
The DA of the city. Like
a DA in the city.
Unbelievable.
Right. By the way, who has nobody with him. With him. He's going to a clandestine club to do drugs, doesn't have a bodyguard, doesn't have an assistant, because that happens. I mean, I'm sorry. People in the real world do this who are DAs, sometimes, not all, whatever. We've all seen the mayors of New York. Like they do this, they're not alone. By the way, he leaves the club also by the front door, goes 30 feet to his SUV, which is parked in an adjacent alleyway. He's the only one parked there. There is nothing around him, not even a dumpster, just an alleyway in the dark. And he gets attacked in his SUV. Like, first off, it's an American SUV. The alarm's gonna go off if you breathe next to it. Even if you have the key fob, it doesn't even work. It's probably gonna catch on fire on the drive home. So there's no way the Riddler, this bumbling kid, is inside the SUV already. That's stupid. It was lame.
I expected it to at least be like car bomb. Like I expected car bomb. I'm like, really, the back seat? And it's just, I don't get it.
I just don't get the appeal of this movie because, and again, all of this stuff, as I'm saying it, you're either one of two places at this. You're either, oh my God, he's kind of right. Or you're like, this guy's off the rails. Is he off his meds? Does he need more of his meds? What's happening? Probably. But here's the deal, right? 6 to 1, half dozen the other. I'm a podcaster, okay? I'm allowed. So here's the deal. When I was in the theater, I was actually relieved that I didn't dislike the movie as much as I was afraid I was going to by hearing what Matt Reeves was saying. Because when you hear a director, Stephen Sommers did this with Van Helsing, right? When you see a director start saying all sorts of disparate sources of inspiration for the project, it often means they do not have a clear idea of what they're doing with it. Not always. Sometimes it's just so advanced and so brilliant that we as the audience aren't getting enough pieces from them to put it together how it actually is going to be. But it's a telltale sign of a project that could be in trouble. Okay. So when we hear that, then you look at the movie, I was very scared. But what it is a 3-hour, mostly coherent movie. The problem is that it seems skit based because one scene does not lead to the next scene. How does he, by the way, catch the Riddler? The Riddler is waiting for them at the nearby diner. He is waiting for them. Again, back to Jeff's point, there is no detective work.
He never beats him. He never gets one up on
Never. And and again, it brings back to the problem too of I'm like, you know what? You should have made the Riddler then a racist or a super populist person, right? He needed some drive to do this because the idea that he is both anti-corruption and is online with a bunch of extremist trolls is a fiction. If we had extremist left-wing people to the extent that we have extremist right-wing people in this country, things would probably be different, but we don't. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm saying that they don't operate and effectively work the same way. Right-wing people who are extremists actually, unfortunately, coordinate better than left-wing activists. That's why we see horrible things like mass shootings at churches and of that aren't Christian, or of Black people or gay people in this country, is because people who are extremists with hate tend to either be more gung-ho and effective with their crazy zealotry, and they also, like Kyle Rittenhouse, tend to get, and yes, I'm getting political because that's part of this story here, they're tried to anyway, or teased at it, they will get support from the right-wing extreme members of the parties. So when you have that, you can't just say, you can't do that, pull that punch like, well, everybody has to like this movie, my hands go up, both sides are at fault. You can't do that. Pick one. Just pick one. This isn't like, I mean, this isn't Death Wish. No one's gonna, even if they string you up online on Twitter, it would at least be a coherent narrative. So, but when you try to do that, you just undermined all of the great thought you had by having someone like this character be the Riddler who coordinates other people to do his bidding online. Like, those are interesting nuggets of concepts, right? But the plot doesn't help it. It can't grow, it can't bloom, it can't work as a good story because there's just a bunch of these elements tossed into a blender and then stuck onto the most simple bad guy beating hero Silence of the Lambs without Anthony Hopkins and no strong narrative arc or A to B progression.
Well, I mean, I think like for me, it was like you have this character that's very anti-corruption. He has like some sort of I don't even really fully understand his politics because it doesn't really
basically
make sense.
There was an orphanage project that never got built and everybody involved skimmed money off of it instead.
I mean I understand what was on the screen. But they didn't fully explain like the Riddler's actual like
goal.
Well, his vision, like for like the world, like
yeah,
what did he
right?
want the world to be? It was kind of like, oh, I don't like the way the world is, so I'm just going to burn it all down. Like that was kind of like,
but he's not even, and that's the thing, it's not even
sense.
burning it all down, right? Because the Joker in Heath Ledger's Joker and in the comics, this is one of the similarities that have made it to screen, is they're sort of a force for themselves, but also for chaos, right? That chaos is part of what feeds them. They want to do things that upset the balance. This character, like you said, they didn't pick something like racism or even socialism, right? Anything that could be considered an extreme because it's not where we're at currently. They didn't pick that. And so, yeah, what was his end game? His end game was to end up in jail and have the Batman stop a bunch of his followers from shooting the mayor and then random strangers in a flood safety zone. Like, it just didn't have any sort of sensical weight. There's like, and also, guess what? More kids were killed at Sandy Hook than in that attack. So what are you trying to tell us? Like, I don't understand the scope of his actual thing. Like you said, the swelling of the music, all that stuff. Not that it wouldn't be a terrible event, but they could have done that at a shopping mall. They didn't need to blow up a dike and flood half of downtown and then have people crowd. It just didn't make sense. None of it made sense. They didn't look at it from 2 feet away like you do with a painting to see if your perspective is right. You know, they made the whole film at this weird granular level and then said, my masterpiece. And you look at it and you're like, wow, it's great, but Botticelli wouldn't have made that person's hand 6 times the size of their face and that other guy's hand, you know, the size of a pinhead. It just doesn't work. And I know I've ripped it apart, but I will say this. I agree with Jeff. I do think this has the potential to make for a far superior sequel. Far superior. The reason is because you sort of can't backtrack and do an origin story after your fake origin story. And you could have an interesting villain. But here's the thing. I don't want it to be that Joker. No, I don't want 2 people in their 30s playing people in their 20s who are supposed to be in their 30s acting like children. I don't want that.
Because you fucked up the timelines. You can't even bring in Joaquin Phoenix.
Well, no, but that's the thing too. Warner Brothers, they have trouble with sticking with the plot. They knew when they greenlit this years ago that this was going to be on its own timeline. They knew that the Joker was going to be on its own timeline, and we should talk about that because I have thoughts on that movie too. But anyway, I've talked your ears off. It's been me. I don't know why I'm saying anybody else. You guys did put in some amazing things. I'm proud that you got words in around my mad screaming, because they could have just listened to me talk about a movie like this and been like, that's it. That's our Riddler. That guy right there. He seems fine. And then when something bothers him, he loses his mind. But they didn't. They just apparently listened to the pod and just based it off that and said, Paul Dano, watch this guy for a couple hours. But anyway, that has been this episode of the Batman. But let's go to the recommendations, because we may have some different takes. This is a rare one for me. I don't recommend this movie. I don't think there's enough to recommend it. I don't think the Batman is strong. The plot isn't strong. I think the whole movie is muted. By the way, the car chase scene, their one attempt at a big action scene, Tad said it was exciting. I didn't really like it. 1, they played the whole thing in the trailer. 2, it ended with the most ridiculous anticlimactic garbage. Batman and Gordon catch the Penguin, and they basically leave him chained up to what, a building or pipe or something, as though he didn't do anything.
He was just
standing there.
He was actually walking.
As though he didn't just lead and cause a multi-casualty, freeway destroying chase. They don't arrest. Like, why was he free in the first place after that? He caused an explosion of like an oil truck. There are dead people littering the street. That highway is going to be closed for days. How could they leave him there?
Man? You know, they're on a case. They can't open a new case until they close the last
That's
case.
why.
Not only do I not recommend this movie, but I think watch the Penguin series when it comes out, if it actually goes to fruition in film. Watch the sequel. I don't think you'll need to see this movie, because I cannot imagine a single thing in this movie that actually led to character progression and will leave you in the dark if you watch the next one. Robert Pattinson's Batman. Zoe Kravitz is Catwoman. Paul Dano's Riddler. The guy from the Eternals is the Joker, and Catwoman is, again, Zoe Kravitz. That's it. That's the only thing. You don't need anything else. You could just read the poster of this film and you get everything. I don't recommend it, and it hurts me. It hurts me. It's a huge miss for me. I think that time will show this to be a weak film after time has passed. But we're moving on now. Jeff, do you recommend this movie? If so, why and who?
All right, so I brought up the first reason I didn't like the film. It was too soft. Then we talked about it was too simple. And now the last reason that I don't like this film is it's too dark. And it's the Dark Knight, and it's meant to be dark, and the lighting's dark, and everything's dark, and that's all great and dandy. But it's too dark. Here's actually the very first villain in Batman we ever see is the Joker, and he's the best villain, I think. Like, nobody's gonna even argue with me on that. Like, it'd be hard to find somebody that'll say like somebody's a better villain.
When you say arch nemesis, you think Batman and Robin. You don't even think God and Satan. You think Batman and Joker.
It's
Robin's a whole different dynamic.
It's yeah. So, and there's such a good reason for it. The Batman is grumpy, unhappy. He rarely smiles, and the Joker always smiles. He's joyful. He's happy, and it creates this basically a contrast. What would be the opposite contrast of what you would expect. You have your villain is very happy and smiling all the time, and your protagonist is dour and sad. And so you still have that balance. This movie, Catwoman's miserable, Batman's miserable, Penguin's miserable, the DA's miserable, the guy who owns the city, kind of not that happy. He seemed kind of miserable. Everybody's miserable, and this movie's dark. The Riddler's miserable. We need you can't make a cake with just frosting.
You also need at least a light bulb.
Elements.
You need at least a light bulb, because it's also visually so dark that if the set design could be great, I don't know, because I couldn't see it. And this is what kind of confuses me. When time passes, people choose to forget things. People were tearing apart at the time Batman vs Superman because the movie was visually dark, but the contrasts were right. At least you could see Batman in the dark. Here's the thing about this movie. It is still darker, and the memes flowing around this are actually hilarious, right? You have the 60s, like bright daylight, Adam West, and then you have like 89 Keaton, and then you have Batman vs Superman, and then you have this one, and then they have the next film, which is just a black square. It's like, it's true. This film is too dark. Because dark lighting should be used to some effect, but it doesn't highlight anything in this movie. It is like this over the head bludgeoning with Gotham is a dark place. Well, we get it, but you could actually use lights in your scene to share different emotion, information, visual flair. That's why, Jeff, I think you're right. The most beautiful scene is that quote unquote Instagram moment when Batman, we get this overhead shot of Batman leading people through the water behind him. But the problem is that it doesn't match the rest of the movie. It's the most well-lit thing in the whole film. And as you said, it doesn't make sense as to why it's even happening. I thought from the trailer they were going to end up in a cave. I'm like, are they under like the Bat Cave or something? And no, it's just a flooded auditorium. But again,
yeah. So the Riddler's outfit is like ridiculous, right? It's like this bright green, thing. Like you'd spot him anywhere, and he's like, a little bit manic and like fine. Like Batman needs some sort of opposition somewhere in his stories.
Why aren't the gangsters happy? They're running the city. They have money.
Why? Yeah. How is Penguin? He runs like this sex club, or not sex club, but you know what I mean. Like
sex club. It's actually just a really boring dinner
on
club.
Top of the world. He should be like the happiest man there is, but he's like this sad middleman that's like,
and he's kind of the only one that is actually remotely feigning happiness. Like John Turturro's character, who again, another layer of villain that doesn't need to be there, fantastic actor, one of the best actors in my opinion in the game, is just left to act as though he knows Catwoman is his daughter, but at the same time then be surprised that it's his daughter. You're like, no, really, the script implied he knew she was her daughter, so you can't backtrack and make that not a thing later on. But anyway, Yeah, I agree with you. Nothing stands out in this movie visually.
Yeah, the DA out partying, unhappy. You know what I mean? Like every
The
where,
DA
where
was
is
the
the
saddest man. Like he was
should
the
have
saddest
Sniveling
man.
loser of a dude. Like
He can't
should have
even
been-
talk up the cocktail waitress at an exclusive club. Like, I mean, that's kind of their job, is to smile and serve him more expensive booze if they're not in a
and we
club where they
find out
sleep
that
with him.
he's like flush with cash later because he's getting like 10,000 a month in bribes. Like it
By the
again
way,
doesn't
how
make
does he
any
die?
sense.
Rats eat his guts? It doesn't make sense.
I
I'm
thought
like,
his head blew up.
Yeah, his
what?
head
That's
blew
right.
up.
His
Yeah,
head
yeah.
blew up. It doesn't. The head blew. The rats were just, for flavor, I guess.
There were rats like in the thing.
Yeah, weren't there? Am I
Wasn't that
making
someone
up?
else?
I think it was
Someone-
a different one.
They all.
There was like
here's
a
what the-
rat maze like on
Yeah.
a person's head.
Here's the problem.
But then yeah, no, he
his
had like a
saw
collar that
equipment.
exploded.
Yeah, all of his. That's the problem. All of his equipment looks the same. It's all made out of plexiglass and hot glue, and it's just. I don't know what the prop department was doing. I will give it this. The Batman costume looks great. I really
Okay.
no notes on it. I liked it.
Mhm.
I like the leather cowl instead of the hard cowl. It was a nice touch. Mandy, would you recommend the Batman 2022? If so, why and to who?
I would not. I would not, because the only things that I could take away from this is things that I actually liked or found amusing or entertaining at all were the thumb drive that we talked about. As a high point. It was very handy.
Which is way in the beginning.
Like it's way at the
handy.
beginning and it was just like dumb. It wasn't a riddle. Again, it was just like a really bad dad joke kind of thing. And then the scene where he does like the squirrel suit and he like, but not the squirrel suit part. Okay. So I'm getting like,
yeah, okay.
not
Yeah, he
but
flies off a
that part.
building. Yeah.
He flies off a building and then he uses a parachute to like slow himself down, but the parachute gets stuck like on a bridge
Yeah.
and he like crashes and he like gets up and he kind of looks around to see if anyone saw him crash and then he's
Yeah.
just like, oh, nobody saw that, like just walks off. I was just like a stumbling drunk who's like, nobody saw that I'm drunk. Like
Yeah.
I'm totally
it was,
like fooling everyone.
as Tad
or
said, it was
something.
another like it was stealing from yet another movie. It felt like Tobey Maguire trying to stick to walls in Spider-Man
like,
2 when he's losing his, like it felt
Yeah.
like that.
Absolutely. But those are the only two things that I found amusing in the whole film. The rest of it just, I was either bored, annoyed, or confused. Like thinking that I missed something or, but I didn't. And then so that annoyed me. And then just not understanding what was going on with the sets. Like at the very end, Catwoman and Batman are on their motorcycles, but it also looks like they're on the roof or
They're
up high in a
suspended.
building.
Yeah, it looks like they're on the
they're on
turrets of something,
the
but
roof.
it's a
We can
bridge.
see the
Yeah.
roof line, and I'm like, but it's is it a crypt? Like she was going to
I don't
see something.
she says,
I was
and by the way, she
and
says
so I'm
she's
like-
going to Bloodhaven, which is another Easter egg because that's the nearby city where Nightwing goes to be. But here's the problem. Catwoman is like, come with me. And you're like, why? Why do you want this guy with you? He's a putz.
don't.
He's a putz. The best line, he does have a good line, which is like, what's under that mask? Are you scarred under there? Which was in one of the trailers, unfortunately. And he goes, yes, which is a cute, that's actually a good, line. That's the one line.
It's a good line.
I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Reeves walked in and goes, I want to make a Batman movie. Imagine this, Catwoman, Batman, what do you got under there? Are you scarred? Yes. And they were like, do it, go make it. And then they watched the whole thing and they're like, man, we should ask more follow-up.
Yeah. No, I was also just enraged by his haircut the whole time.
Ooh,
I just
we didn't even talk
Oh,
about
man.
how
I
can
was just
people
just
complain
Ooh.
about Spider-Man 3 with Tobey Maguire's emo phase with the black suit. How can they complain about that in the dance scene when we literally have the same ridiculous time period inappropriate haircut on Bruce Wayne, and he walks around with running mascara all over town? Did nobody think, hey, isn't that super fucking rich kid that is on the tabloids as being reclusive, and he has, I wonder is he wearing a mask sometimes? Oh wait, we have a masked vigilante here, right?
Right.
Just, you can't.
Oh, you mean mascara? You mean whole blackout
Yeah,
around his
hey,
eyes?
it's
Yes.
called it's called makeup wipes. Neutrogena
Yeah.
makes very affordable ones. You can even pick them up at a 7-Eleven. You think that he can't? Does he not have the internet? Was he raised in a cabin? Anyway, sorry, off the
penthouse.
rails again.
With yeah, I know. Oh, so anyway,
I'm gonna sleep good tonight.
you are very much expressing my frustration, rage, confusion, like just all negative feelings except for the crash and the thumb drive. Like that was it. So, I mean, I guess if you just want to watch clips of those two things, like I'd recommend those. But otherwise, just like absolutely avoid this movie. It's terrible.
And also, I'm going to throw it out there. I can't remember where I've seen it, but the thumb drive and a severed thumb has been done before. It's been
I'm
done
sure they could
so
probably
many
get them at
times.
Spencer's or something, right? Like,
here's I don't know what Jeff's saying, but here's the thing. I just realized.
Oh, yeah.
I just realized
it was an obvious pun. Like, of course.
Yeah, I just realized that Jeff wormed his way out of actually giving a recommendation or a not recommendation.
Oh, I don't recommend it. I'll say that I'm going to come back. I'm going to put this on reserve. If the sequel is good and actually plays off of some of the stuff that they did in this film, I might say that it actually is worth watching.
That can't happen. You just named something. It's like a jumbo
like
shrimp.
One of those. This movie just doesn't work like on so many levels. I don't know why it's so well reviewed. I actually tried to read some like reviews to like get a feel for like what people are thinking, and I literally don't understand what they like. It feels like they watched a different movie than me. I've never had this experience before where I read like even movies I don't like, I understand why people like them.
Right.
Like this one, like I just don't get what people got out of this.
If it was
like,
2 hours,
they were like
maybe
so
it would be
mindless
tolerable.
that they're just like they didn't think about what they were seeing like at all. Like they didn't process it.
Exactly.
And they just were like had a good experience.
Well,
I can see that, I guess.
We're gonna get to Tab, but I do have one thing to ask first. So thinking that way, one, we're all starved for movies in theaters, right? And big budget movies. I think that's the thing. Plus, it's a comic movie, so everybody sees it. The thing I have to ask is, I think back to, this is kind of obscure now, even for Mystery Science Theater 3000 fans, but near the end of the Sci-Fi Channel run of Mystery Science Theater 3000, it was Mike Nelson as the head, and Bill Corbett and Kevin Murphy and Mary Jo Pehl and Bridget Nielsen and everybody else. So when it was at that point, they did like a special, this was in the 2000s sometime, they did a like summer blockbuster trailer and clip review show. It was like a 20-minute show where they took some big movies, like I think it was Ever After with Drew Barrymore and Saving Private Ryan and probably some others, and they riffed on like selections that they were provided to. So it was like this joint advertising thing. They said something so poignant about Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan. I think it might have been Crow, voiced by Bill Corbett, but I can't remember specifically. But he said, Steven Spielberg's new movie, not only are you supposed to see it, you're supposed to like it. And that's so true in our the Hollywood cinema mediascape, right? There are certain things that not only are you expected to see them, but you are told by every single thing about the advertising campaign, who's talking about it, who's in it, everything points to, you will see it and you will enjoy it. And there's such a distinction. I do not like Saving Private Ryan. It is a better movie than this, but I actually don't like that movie in general, but it completely worked. Every single person that I talked to loved that movie. And yet many of them, not all of them, but many of them couldn't really tell me why. And I think it's because of that groupthink media pressure that comes on certain things. And I think that's happened with this movie. If enough people say something is great and good and awesome and see it, it really, just like if I had come in and said, this movie we're watching next week is terrible, absolutely the worst thing ever, you would have a very specific set of expectations and reactions. They would be different if I said, this is one of my favorite movies, right? You guys still would be on the fence because you know me and I've made you watch a lot of different movies, but that's the thing. So I think that is one of the syndromes that is played into this experience. Am I mad about it? At the level of a creative person who wants really excellent work to be rewarded, I am mad. In the idea of someone who loves Batman and wants things to continue and wants more people to fall in love with the mythos and the character and the world and the comics, I'm not mad. But it's a very tough ledge to stand on when something like this happens, when you just really, it makes you feel, as you said, Jeff, it makes you feel crazy. because everyone is so like in love, but I don't know what glamour spell is on it, because from a narrative point, this is a train wreck for me. Now I'm going to go to you, Tad. I'm sorry I took such a diatribe.
I am literally witnessing Nathan's origin story of him turning into a Batman villain, and it's wonderful.
Seriously,
I am, as usual. I sometimes like to be the dissenting voice just to be a pain in the ass, but this is one of those times I'm actually the dissenting voice. I liked it. Did I have a lot of problems with it? I sure did, because I articulated it. You guys did your best to make me not like this movie, but ultimately,
my job is done.
I still enjoyed some of the spectacle, for all the flaws that I can find of it, for as much as I can tear apart the narrative, because I understand Batman. Ultimately, I'm not as emotionally invested in Batman as other people would be. So I can just sit back and go, it's a Batman movie. It's not the best Batman movie. It makes me want to watch The Dark Knight instead. However, I liked it, and it certainly was better than Man of Steel in my lens. Because the Man of Steel for me was a coherent mess, visually and script-wise, of a story.
Well, we've gone over this, even though, yeah, we've gone over this. I'm not going to fight with you because I understand different opinions. I really love Man of Steel, but here's the thing I'll say. Here's the thing I'll say, because I'm not going to keep our listeners on for another 2 hours of me just breathing heavily into the microphone, trying to catch my breath, is I understand what you're saying. I love Star Wars.
Basically the movie we just talked about, but sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I love Star Wars. And I am a fan. I see all of it. I really love the mythos, but it isn't sacred to me, which I think is what you're saying. To me, Batman is sacred because Batman has really been sort of this weird, boy, I'd like to be an angry rich kid who could fight crime too. I don't like being powerless. Like, that's why he's one of these iconic characters, right? So many people can put themselves in his shoes, even though if you were really in his shoes, it would actually be a crappy place to be. But you would be rich, so, get a therapist. But I get it. It just feels to me like it is a Batman story, but they didn't have a plot. Everything is in place and it just moves to the end. Will I see the sequel? Of course. Of course. Will we talk about it? Of course. Will I have problems? Sure. Will I hopefully have less problems? Yes. You said this movie made you want to watch The Dark Knight. This movie made me want to watch Batman and Robin. Okay. I really had a hard time.
It made me want to watch Batman Forever. Like
I would go back and watch Batman and Robin now. I would.
Batman, yeah. So anyway, and I have feelings about that movie. Anyway, yes. Thank you guys so much, listeners. If you made it to the end of this episode, thank you so much for listening to me rail against something that so many people love for so long. Feel free to send us your dissenting opinions. Also, feel free to agree. I've actually seen quite a few people who popped up being like, I didn't really like it. And that's okay too. Like, everybody's opinion is fine. Don't hurt people. Don't really attack people. If it's in jest, it's okay. We certainly can take it here at Cult and Classic Podcast because we dish it out all the time, right, Matt Reeves? But I hope you guys have a great day. Please, if you like the pod, leave us a many star review wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Cult and Classic Podcast, on Facebook.com/Cult and Classic Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube page. We'll be having videos loaded up by the end of the year. Everything will be up to date, and we will also be airing these every week on the YouTubes. That is, the channel is Cult and Classic Podcast. And please send us your email and hate mail to Tad at cultandclassicpodcast@gmail.com. To play us out, as always, is the Chud with All About Evil. And I hope you guys have a great week. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.